The Prince of Wales doesn't seem to be keen to have peace talks.
And Meghan Markle's catty couture meltdown. Welcome to Heirs and Spares, the show that dives into the fascinating world of two of the most recognized royal couples from both sides of the Atlantic. I'm Kinsey Schofield, bringing you updates on Prince Harry and Meghan Markle.
Hi, and I'm Rupert Bell. I'm not coming from mainland Britain. I'm in Northern Ireland for the Open Golf Championship this week. I'm staying in some high-class student accommodation. Oh, the life of being a sports reporter on the road. However, I will be bringing you all the news on the Prince and Princess of Wales, and they've certainly been in the news this week.
Thoughts and prayers to your internet connection is what I'll say right off the bat. Thoughts and prayers. So we're going to keep our fingers crossed. I know I'm probably going in too soon on this story, but it affects all of the sons of the king. Seeing reports that Prince William was quote unquote snubbed from these peace talks. I think I agree with you in your tone that Prince William would have no desire to be involved in said peace talks. But we're also reading that Prince Harry is fuming after details of a peace summit were revealed to the Daily Mail. He's also denying that his camp had anything to do with this leak. The story is, over the weekend, the Daily Mail exclusively broke that senior aides working for the king and Prince Harry took their quote-unquote first steps towards royal reconciliations by holding sensitive talks out in the open where any photographer could just snap a photo, and did snap a photo. It was at this private members club in central London. They start out on the patio with drinks and then they go inside. And for some reason, we know the location, we know the time, there are pictures taken, and we know the subject of those talks. Rupert, I'd love your reaction to the idea of peace talks. And then let's talk about the Prince William's absence.
Well, I'm not surprised that William's not involved, right? I don't see that, because that's the first bridge that Harry and his team have to involve is with his father. If that does show signs that it has some meat and is sensible and is not going to involve in things rushing to the papers about anything that is said, William is not prepared, I don't think, at this stage to even go there. And until they know that there is a period of trust built up. Now, the trouble is, the Sussexes may deny that they didn't go bleating to the press. Now, was in a high-profile place, and media types would have noticed them and probably could have tipped off other people. But unfortunately, the Sussex camp there's even trust about that because of what they've done before. And this is the problem for the Sussexes. Their actions before have created a level of suspicion that anything that does come out, immediately people say, well, it must be them. Now, I have no idea whether it is them or not them. So I'm not going to prejudge and assume it is one way or another. But that is the problem for the Sussexes. And if they are just trying to find a way of Harry restoring his relationship with his father, then that seems something that everyone should do. But as I've said before, Harry is without contact with his family. He's friendless in America. Meghan, I'm not sure friends are rushing up the street to Montecito, but she's on home turf. He's not. He's the lonely one. And I think, with his father's cancer diagnosis, is feeling, like any son about their father, slightly lonely about this. And I'm not defending him, because he's created this problem, but he's the one who's got to make the move. And it's for the king to then decide, do I want to take this further if I can rebuild the trust? And for William, he won't even come anywhere near the situation, I'm pretty sure, until he feels that Harry is in a position almost to go mea culpa.
One of our mutual friends, Mike Graham, brought something to my attention, because of course, there's a million theories. Could the king be thinking to himself, look, the lawsuit's over, Harry against the government, Harry lost. I'm ill. Let's just sweep this under the rug. Let's just get this over with. This is ridiculous. I think that a lot of people are saying online, well, Harry and Meghan have run out of money. So clearly now it's time to go crawling back. But one of my probably a controversial take I had was that maybe the palace did leak it to garner a reaction from the public, the reaction being so negative, and this way they can say, look, we made an effort, but realistically we can't bring you back into the fold because there was so much anger that and of course that's a long shot, but our friend Mike Graham brought this to my attention, saying perhaps somebody from Williams' camp would leak this story because they want to they were angry that they were excluded, or they want to ensure that you did get that negative public reaction. Any thoughts there?
I think you can come up with every theory.
Yeah.
We've probably done everything. You've done William, you've done the King, we've done Harry. I'm not sure where else we could have just done a member of the public.
What's Meghan doing? Harry,
yeah.
What's Meghan doing?
Yeah.
What's Meghan doing? We need to make sure Meghan wasn't on the phone with somebody at the Daily Mail.
We can speculate till the cows come home here, but whatever, there is clearly something going on between the respective teams. Now, what was discussed? Were they just having a glass of rosé on a glorious London afternoon, and everyone's been sweltering and with the heat? So I think we have to take it at face value and say at least there is some level of communication. Now, the PR team for the Sussexes always seem to be on a hiding to nothing, because we know that their bosses are the most difficult pair to work for, because they change their mind like the wind. They will say something and then they'll do the opposite. So they're a very hard team to work for. Whatever comes out long term, this is not a short-term solution. This will play out over a series of months. But I do think it's coming about because Harry is, let's be honest, is completely rudderless in America at the moment. We're not basically going to a few trade things and speaking a bit of word salad and then going back to Montecito. And that's my take on it at the moment. And it's Harry probably saying, I'd quite like to get back with my dad because I may be just missing him.
That's so much nicer than I am.
Well, Kinsey, you're normally quite nice, but I'm trying to offer a sympathetic take. But I'm basically saying it's all because of the Sussexes doing. Even with doing that BBC interview a few weeks ago, he added fuel to the fire because he's a plonker.
Yeah, as I've been covering this, I've said, look, a royal reconciliation, I think realistically, yes, if I'm putting my if I'm thinking with my heart and not my head, I go, yes, we would love Prince Harry to reconcile with his ill father. Common sense says that's the way to go. But if I'm thinking if I'm thinking with my head and not my heart, then I say Harry and Meghan are still a liability, and I want the royal family to protect themselves by avoiding them. And I know that that's really harsh, but I don't think I'm alone in that feeling that I don't think Harry and Meghan deserve to be back in the fold. I think that what they've done has been so selfish and hurtful over the last few years, and they haven't ever apologized for it. They haven't ever taken responsibility for their own actions. And I don't think that I don't think we'll see them take responsibility for their own actions. I think we would just see them do a victory lap if the king did allow them back in any way, shape, or form.
Sad that the situation has got to this. And I don't know how, no one wants a reconciliation, but it has to be Harry and Meghan.
The source described the summit as the first step towards reconciliation between Harry and his father, and a step in the right direction, adding it was finally the right time for the two sides to talk. There's still a long way to go, but this is the first time in years that there's been a direct line between them. It wasn't a formal sit down, just relaxed drinks. Both sides had things they needed to say, and how frightening that they can't say them to each other. How frightening that we have to enlist our communications team to when Harry has something to say, though, at least it's through a communications team semi-privately versus on the BBC, which threw us all off. We were so taken aback by that BBC interview and appalled. Appalled is the best way to put it, because he said he didn't know how much longer his father had to live, and again was just like throwing his dirty laundry out for the world to see.
The problem is, people want, the only way it's going to come about, I think, a proper reconciliation is if there's a bit of Harry and Meghan have got to apologize. But the problem is, Meghan is convinced by her rightness, and Harry just follows on a bit like a dumb poodle. And as a result, the issue, and until he actually says, right, I got to say, I've slightly messed up here. Sorry, Dad. We've got to resolve this, and I promise to do better. That's really, and that perhaps I have gone a bit over the top, and he has. But he's at the moment a 40-year-old man looking completely rudderless. He goes up and does a few word salad speeches around America, it would seem, and it's just sad. Maybe when he comes over in September for the Well Child, which is his normal time for coming over and always goes to it, will that be a chance for him to see his dad, who will probably be up in Scotland at the time? But it needs the Sussexes to grab the situation and say, sorry, but as they say in the song, isn't sorry the hardest word to say?
It is.
Have I misquoted that? Have I misquoted that, Kinsey? You probably know better.
I think it's close enough. I think the real quote is, sorry is not in the Sussexes vocabulary.
Okay, well, that's not a song I've heard yet, but, sorry can be a difficult word, but it could go a long way to building some form of rapprochement, if that's what they really want. But they went to America. That's the life she wants. She's launched her fantastic rosé, he says, probably
sarcastically.
Sarcastically, and she's launched her spread, magnificent apricot spread, slopping all over the kitchens of the land, So I just have to say, I don't expect a sorry word to come out of Meghan's mouth, because she wouldn't. She is convinced, and has been probably since she was a young girl, by her own rightness.
Can you see a situation where the palace says, yeah, but you have to apologize publicly?
I think until they actually offer some form of saying, we were a bit hasty and we have said some things that have caused hurt, but they don't see it at the moment. And I think the palace does have to get them to be quite clear and a bit of contrition. Mm-hmm. And if you don't come up with any contrition, but, words are easy. It's actions. And that's why, as we said already, there is suspicion about who leaked this. And we've come up with every theory possible. And that's the problem. Because the trust between all sides is in a sort of, it's so broken that no one knows who's doing what. But the lack of suspicion it always falls on the Sussexes. Now, for once, they may be innocent. I don't know. But I do not expect anytime soon the word sorry to come out of their mouths.
Does it ever surprise you how they pick and choose what to respond to and what to come out against, what headlines they fight back against? Because I had Meghan fight back against a story, one of my stories last week, and I thought and it was so irrelevant that I thought it's interesting how they determine what they want to argue with. Because when a really big and bad story happens and then they ignore it, but they'll react to something I said, I'm like, well, it makes you look guilty when you ignore the serious stories.
Well, they've got themselves in a pickle over the years, with different, one minute they do something, and it's because no one knows how they're going to react. And it is interesting that this weekend we get this story dominating across the Sunday newspapers in this country, as the same weekend that, of course, the Princess of Wales has, not only been at the state visit of the President of France, but obviously as patron of the All England and Tennis and Croquet Club, she turns up to the men's and women's finals at the weekend. So her picture is splashed everywhere. And of course, on the Sunday, she's with her family. So, okay, that's fine for Mondays, but the Sunday stories were dominated by that rather than necessarily her appearing at Wimbledon in the most one-sided women's final in the history of the event. But it doesn't matter. She was there and to see that final. But of course, you then get the Sussex story dominating. And that's the interesting dynamic about what happens, because everybody thinks that when there's a Princess of Wales story, suddenly there's a story around the Sussexes. And this is where, again, the lack of trust, the lack of people with all sorts of theories out there. And you and I, yes, we hear tittle tattle, but we're not, none of it, a lot of it is the rumor mill. And you have to somehow say, right, let's quell the rumor mill down. But it just does feel like the same time that the Waleses are on the front page, the Sussexes have to come up in this country and match them.
I'm really glad you brought that up, because I hadn't well, I'll tell you why that hadn't even occurred to me, aside from the fact that I don't probably see your papers as religiously as I should. I used to look at tomorrow's papers today every day, but sometimes I forget to. But honestly, my radar is on Catherine, the Princess of Wales, and I actively do ignore the Sussexes until I'm assigned to talk about them. But otherwise, I think that they're so uninteresting. They appeal very little to me, and I'd much rather look to see what sunglasses Princess Charlotte's wearing at Wimbledon, or what the Princess of Wales is saying to people on the court. You mentioned that we should expand on the Princess of Wales sighting. It was so nice to see her, because of course the headlines after Prince William's charity polo game were that Catherine was nowhere to be seen, as if that was something to be alarmed about. Maybe she just had a busy agenda and wanted to save her energy for this weekend on the tennis courts. It was so nice to see the way she comforted the runner-up after the female match. Did that tug at your heartstrings at all?
Well, it's quite normal. We can think back to the Duchess of Kent doing it to Jana Novotná in the 90s. Like, I've been going to Wimbledon as a reporter since 94, commentating. So I've seen it. It's quite normal, because the royal family are quite good at consoling the runners-up, because you have to go through this rigmarole of being interviewed. So it's quite tough on the runner-up. And the last place he or she probably wants to be is out on the court.
With a microphone in their face.
With a microphone in the face, and having to sort of, and particularly if you've been walloped, or what they call over in your neck of the woods a double bagel, and that is unprecedented in 114 years. And the American backstory of Amanda Anisimova is very interesting anyway. But to actually capitulate like that against Iga Swiatek, who's an interesting story. I know we're not supposed to be a sports where this is Heirs Spares, but she's an interesting story. Had her own battles, been banned for a bit and everything. So there was a lot going on in that final from both sides. But the Princess of Wales doing, a leaf out of the old Duchess of Kent's book, consoling, but that's what the Princess of Wales is about. She understands, the pain in this case of defeat. She's a sports fan. And probably it's all right to celebrate the winning moment, but in times of need, and she could probably see that scoreline suggested that the Princess of Wales needed to offer some, saying, well done to, I don't know what she said.
Apparently it was, you should be so proud of yourself, or something like that.
Well, I get that. You should be so proud that you've bounced back from your own personal travails, and here you are, you've got through to the final. And actually, when it came to the final, which is a big emotional moment for a lot of players, because it takes, that's what they all strive for. And then when you get there, and then you just basically can hardly hit the ball back over the net, and it's 57 minutes, and the sporting tennis world is watching you, and you end up that. She's now in the history books. She's a very talented player, but now when you look at the scoreline in 20 years' time, you'll go, well, what happened there? What she now has to do is come back next year and win the darn thing. And just like Jana Novotná did later on, came back, won it. So maybe that's what will happen. But it's great to see the Princess of Wales doing that. And then, of course, on the Sunday, we get 4 of them turning up. I mean, Louis sitting there for a 3-hour tennis match. I mean, oh, my goodness me. That would require, restraining of the utmost order. But it was quite interesting watching them enjoying it. Look, of course, family day out Sunday, patrons bringing along her husband and the two kids and getting a front row seat. It was not a tough gig,
Yeah.
but I'll tell you what, it was an A-list royal box. I don't know whether you saw, Matthew McConaughey looking.
Matthew McConaughey jumped up to
Yeah.
clap for them, which I thought was really sweet.
Yeah, it was a pretty, it's a hot ticket in the royal box. So he's in there. You've got the King of Spain in the house as well, looking extremely elegant. You had Nicole Kidman there and various other A-listers. I mean, it's a hot ticket. And it was great to see William enjoying himself. George giving it the full. I think he may have been an Alcaraz supporter. I'm not entirely sure, but my goodness me, there's pictures of him with the death stare. I don't know when he's seen it, but he's looking over it. Sort of, is he angry that his Alcaraz lost? I don't know what's going on, but very full of expression. But it was also on the Saturday the ovation the Princess of Wales got. Look, she's playing to her natural audience. Let's be quite clear. It's not as if, it's going to be an audience that's going to be against her 99.9% of people will be absolutely pro her. So it was like walking into the easiest standing ovation of your life, but it was still, and I think she looked genuinely taken aback by the reception that she's got. But, and that fact that she was there for 2 days was great. But it is interesting that immediately we've been ending up more talking about the Sussexes and our reconciliation rather than her enjoying her role as patron of Wimbledon.
Yeah, she looked so well. I mean, the state visit in the Dior, I think she has looked better than I've seen her in quite some time. She looks so happy, healthy, and like you said, like she's thoroughly enjoying her position and being there and doing what she was doing. And just watching the way she engages with her daughter is so sweet. They have the same mannerisms, the way that they just sat there fanning themselves, like to the same exact beat. It was a joy. It was really a joy to see them. And you're right, how suspicious that all of a sudden we get a Sussex story that breaks right when we're enjoying our Wales coverage. Seeing Prince William on a polo horse looking like an absolute stallion himself, and then Catherine looking gorgeous. Oh, of course, here comes the Sussex PR machine. I do want to ask you about Prince Harry's Invictus Games CEO addressing whether or not the royal family would be coming to Invictus Games in 2027, because I felt like this was handled with much more grace than I had anticipated. The CEO is asked whether or not the royal family will be there, and the CEO said they are very much welcome at the Invictus Games in 2027. He said, Helen Hellowell told People, we'd be delighted if members of the royal family were able to attend and would very much welcome their presence in a couple of years. Should they accept the invitation, it would mark the first time the royal family had reunited in quite some time. So that was handled really well. Versus, I don't want to comment on personal matters. I think that would have been too dismissive. I thought that this was well executed.
Look, I've spoken to people within the Invictus Games fraternity who are organising the games in Birmingham at the NEC in July of 2027. The important thing is they know the King is head of our services, and his, the sort of, I don't know, commander-in-chief's not there, but, that's very important role and part of the symbolism, him being head of the, looking up to the King within the armed forces. So it would be very sad if the King can't find a way to be at the Invictus Games. And I think because it's on home turf, and under any normal circumstances, he should be there. But there is this dynamic of Harry, it's his baby, but back in the day, it was all three of them. It was sort of given to Harry to take up the cudgels.
And to keep him out of trouble.
Well, it was almost, as the Queen once said about one of her other errant people in the royal family, well, I've got to give him something to do. Mm-hmm. In a way, with Harry, a natural thing for him to be involved in, and he genuinely cares about ex-servicemen and women, and it's something that he does have a passion for, and he does understand. So it makes perfect sense. But this is going to be the issue that, in a way, they need to resolve any problems by them so that the Invictus Games can celebrate what it's about, which is looking after servicemen and women who suffer, on behalf of whatever country it is in difficult circumstances. And that should be the focus of attention. We should not be coming into the Invictus Games going, oh, look at the body language between the King and Prince Harry. It's as frosty as anything. And
Yeah.
we don't want
we
that.
we will be doing that. But yes, I know what
This is the trouble. But this is the trouble when Meghan went to Canada. It all became about Meghan, and I think it sort of ruffled some of the servicemen and women's feathers because the story was about her.
What was she wearing? What her body language towards Prince Harry? They kissed, they hugged. You're absolutely right. You're right.
So that's it. And as an ex-serviceman, I want the servicemen and women who, have suffered in some cases horrible injuries, but have found a way to sort of rehabilitate themselves and, take part in sport as a way of rehabilitating themselves both mentally and to help with their physical rehabilitation as well. It's so important, and I'm absolutely passionate about that, and they should be the ones celebrating. So please, if they're going to have a reconciliation, make sure it happens before the Invictus Games, and make sure that the King can turn up, because he should be there, but that's down the line. So hopefully the water that goes under the bridge between now and then is a gentle one that leads to a more level playing field in terms of relationships, so the King can go there and we won't be just talking about, oh, look at the way Harry. Now, the interesting thing is, will Meghan want to be here?
No, I don't.
Well, they're in there because will she, that means setting foot back in this country. But she may be the Duchess of Sussex, but she wants that title. But let's be honest, does she really want to come back to this country?
No, she wants to sell tea. She wants to sell. It's almost. I know I've said it before, but it's almost cultural appropriation, where she wants to sell your spreads. She wants to sell your tea. She wants to sell her title, but she dismisses it. She doesn't want to be there. It's very vulgar.
Well, and this is the problem. She wants everything to look as if it's that sort of British class thing, supposedly, the strawberries and cream, the tea like Wimbledon, what Wimbledon's all about, that quintessentially British feel, the traditional British feel. So tea, rosé, drinking rosé and all this stuff, and that's what I don't get. She's passionate about keeping the title for her children, passionate about keeping the Duchess of Sussex title, yet she doesn't actually want to come anywhere near the place. So will she bother to come? Now, it's a long time. If we're still doing this Heirs and Spares in 2 years' time, happy days, Kinsey. But, if you can bear to keep going for another 2 years with me, Kinsey.
I love you. It's Meghan I'm not too convinced about.
Well, but she is the Duchess who keeps on giving. Let's call a spade a spade. So I hope that for Harry's sake, that when he, in the build-up, and I'm sure within the build-up of the Invictus Games, but actually that is almost the moment they say that's what we should be working towards, that we've sorted it out before then, so that when that happens, it can be a real celebration with Harry doing what he does best. Because I know when he's left to his own devices at this event, he's a happy bunny.
I do have to ask you about this, though, because I never read this before and it blew my mind, but I believe it 100%. So the Telegraph reports that Meghan was upset in 2019 when she found herself behind Catherine in line for the latest designs from a top fashion designer. Meghan said, allegedly, that she wanted specific pieces from a designer that Catherine had first dibs on. The Telegraph reports that Meghan felt overshadowed by Catherine who is destined to be queen, allegedly expressing frustration over why Kate, that's what they say, not me, I say Catherine, wasn't even queen. She said, why is Kate, who's not even queen, why does she get priority? Who wasn't even queen, who isn't even queen. The pout, the fit, the meltdown was that Catherine wasn't even queen yet, or wasn't even queen. Not yet, wasn't it, the power of yet wasn't even queen. And I thought, for the love of God, it actually reminds me of in Tom Bower's book Revenge, how Thomas Markle told Tom Bower that one of Meghan's biggest issues was jealousy. Somebody in her high, I know when I get into the really good gossip, that's when Rupert would much rather be talking about tennis. Rupert's face just goes, oh no. But in high school, apparently, what somebody that Meghan did theater with signed a TV show, and Meghan was like very jealous, according to her father. To me, just to be like, she's not even queen yet, or she's not even queen. Grow up. Why are you so annoying? I can't stand these stories, and I believe them 100%.
Here's the thing: she doesn't understand didn't understand royal protocol because she is married to the fifth in line to the throne. Princess of Wales is married to the second, to the heir. Or not at that stage, he was third in line. So she was still down the pecking order, but even further. Royal protocol dictates. Now, if there's any sense from any fashion house, they go to the one who's going to shift more. And while Meghan was certainly a lady creating a buzz when she was still within the royal family, and fair play to her, but in a way that just reflects her thinking that she could change the royal family in an instant. And it was all about her because she wanted to be the star of the show. And as I've said before, the moment she walked up that aisle, that was her big starring moment. That was her Gloria Swanson bit in Sunset Boulevard, right? I'm ready for my close-up, Cecil Builder me, whatever. I've messed up the quote again, but that's part of the course for me in this program. I like to mess up
only
quotes.
after one glass of wine. Only after one glass of wine.
But you know what I'm saying. I'm ready for my close-up. She had the close-up, walking in on her own, and from there on in, she had to then fit within the royal system. And she thought, because that wedding, it was all about her, and it was going to be all about her from there on in. But the part became a different one, and she wasn't prepared to accept. And then that revolved around everything. And we've all heard stories about her needing to be that moment, the one, and it all about her. And that was the problem for her because she couldn't cope with that because it wasn't, and it came with constraints within the royal protocol. You had to behave a certain way, and she thought she was beyond that, and that ultimately led to them running off to America.
That point actually does tie this up in a nice little bow, doesn't it? Because just to take it back to something you said, what a great weekend we had whales watching between Prince William. Prince William leads us from polo into Catherine on the courts, and then we get the disruption that have been this secret summit that there are conveniently a million photographs of and plenty of details. Just to kind of piggyback off of what you said, there seems to be somebody that is pretty desperate for attention within this core four. And I wouldn't, now Prince Harry says that it wasn't anyone from his camp that leaked the story, but it is hard to trust these people when they have been leaking like faucets since they stepped back as members of the British royal family. The most blatant examples being Oprah, the Netflix series, and Spare. You managed, although my rundown was all over the place, you managed to bring it all back home, Rupert. I applaud you. That's why you are a professional.
Well, I didn't mean to. Probably hadn't looked at the running order, and I just thought, well, we'll go where you take me, Kinsey. And this week, I'm sitting near the Giant's Causeway, if people want to know, one of the most beautiful and scenic parts of Great Britain and Ireland on the northern coast. It's a very famous coastline. That's where I'm at this weekend for the Open Championship. So anyone curious, because occasionally I do give you updates about where I've been. I've just been to Pembrokeshire, which is another. I'm not working for a tourist board here, Kinsey,
Yeah, you
but
are.
I feel I need to share it. I went to Pembrokeshire, which has got some dramatic West Wales coastline and beautiful part of the country. And also, I'm now in Northern Ireland, and then in a couple of weeks' time, I shall go to Sussex and the Sussex Downs to what they call
Oh my,
glorious
are you
Goodwood.
going to do a work? Are you going to do a man on the street interviews for us and ask people how they feel about the Duke and Duchess of Sussex while you're in Sussex?
I don't think I'm going to get a great deal of positive, but I will be down there at a place called Goodwood, the Duke of Richmond's seat. They have a fabulous racecourse. That's in a couple of weeks' time. But at the moment, as I say, I'm in Northern Ireland. And of course, the royal family call themselves a different title when they're in Northern Ireland, like when they go to Scotland. So there's different titles for whichever part of the country you are. But this is a beautiful part of the world. Ireland is a stunningly beautiful country. But anyway, I'm here for golf. But Kinsey, I've allowed myself to have time. I know you're flying left, right, and centre, and you're coming to the UK, and I'm not even going to see you.
I know that is the worst. That is the worst.
I'm sure you're going to be busy, but we need another fireside chat in a pub somewhere.
I know
But
we
anyway,
do. I know we
but
do.
anyway.
All right. Well, it was good to catch up with you, and we're going to stay on top of this secret summit and all the developments. You and I will have the latest. We'll keep on top of it. In case you're watching, you're curious, and you're committed to that storyline. Well, so are we. Agree with us, disagree with us. Let us know in the comments below. Make sure you like, subscribe, and share this video with a friend. Rupert Bell, it's been such a joy.